Now, from the poison we eat to the poison we drill and spill over people and planet, let's talk BP. BP, or British Petroleum, you may remember as the conniving little cunts behind the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010. They're also the lobbyists behind continued offshore drilling and the shrugging shits avoiding spill cleanup. But BP also has quite a lot going on in their native lands. Besides being global asshats, they like to dip their oily fingers into the British art world. BP are sponsors of the Royal Opera House, the National Portrait Gallery, the Tate, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and the British Museum. To add insult to injury, BP is the overt sponsor of the new exhibition Indigenous Australia, now open at the British Museum. Jess Worth, a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company and environmental activist, took issue with this and decided to use the group that she helped start, BP or Not BP, to send a loud, graphic, and theatrical message to both BP and the British Museum. Take a look.
The BP or Not BP is a theatrical protest group, and we sprang to life in 2012 because BP was sponsoring the World Shakespeare Festival. So for the whole of the World Shakespeare Festival then, we invaded the stage about once a month, once for each of the different plays that was being sponsored, with different performers every time, with a different script, and we would look at the play that was being sponsored and find words and themes and well-known phrases and ideas in there that we would then give a kind of BP tinge to. So audiences really responded to that because they were seeing things that they recognised and they enjoyed the humour.
So talk a little bit about the British Museum. What exactly is their relationship with BP? And I know that the action that you did also focused on Indigenous peoples. How does that fold into the British Museum's relationship with BP?
So the British Museum has a long-running relationship with BP. I think it's maybe about 20 years. So this has been going on for a long time. And they're currently in a 5-year cycle of sponsorship, and BP is sponsoring some of their major high-profile exhibitions. So that's what BP gets out of it. They get the really kind of flashy stuff that gets the maximum publicity they can put their logo onto. And we've been targeting the British Museum probably for about 18 months because that 5-year sponsorship deal is coming up for renewal. So that's going to be decided next spring. So we think the conversations internally about whether or not to continue the relationship with BP are probably starting to happen now. So that's why we've been ramping up. And the current exhibition that's being sponsored by BP is Indigenous Australia, Enduring Civilization, which is a particularly kind of offensive exhibition to put a BP logo onto. And I think a lot of people have felt that, considering that climate change is one of the major reasons why those civilizations may not endure much longer. But also BP is in conflict and has historically been in conflict with Indigenous communities all over the world, throwing them off their land, polluting their water, even kind of funding paramilitaries in Colombia and stuff. So it's really, really insensitive of the British Museum to have put the BP logo on that particular exhibition. And the exhibition itself is super sensitive because the British Museum is like the museum of colonial history. Like, so much of the stuff in that museum is not ours, doesn't belong to the British people, it was stolen. And some of the objects in the exhibition specifically are contested objects that the communities have even taken legal action to get back, and the British Museum has won and has kept them. So there's a real sense of rubbing it in a lot of people's faces. So then you put the BP logo on top of that and you've got a very explosive situation. Well, we actually occupied the space for over 3 hours, which is by far the longest performance we've ever done. And within that performance, we had different characters that kind of brought up the different elements, the different problems of the exhibition. And then we had a central British Museum character who was essentially being controlled or distracted by a very sinister BP character. So they were like the central dynamic, and then we built a drilling rig and then had a spill, and we had like a chorus that were making the noises of the explosion and the spill. So that spilled everywhere, and we had spill cleanup workers, and then They came and talked to the British Museum and said, look at the extent of the destruction. We can't clean it up. How can you be supporting this company? And then we had a colonial explorer who'd just returned from Australia saying, oh, look at all this stuff that I've managed to get for you. Don't you worry about where it came from. And then an audience member sort of representing us, challenging that and challenging our whole colonial history and saying, this is not okay. We're not okay with this. We need to give these objects back. And then we had a really angry climate scientist who was like, you're not listening to the science, British Museum. But BP was busy, kind of putting lots of money in front of their face, so they were distracted. And we had a lot of people in animal masks making animal noises, kind of representing the wildlife that's being destroyed. And then we had quotes from Aboriginal people about the stolen objects, but also about how they feel about BP and the challenges that climate change is kind of having on their ability to survive and maintain their traditions. So that was the kind of formal performance, and then we invited museum goers to kind of join us for storytelling. The banner that we'd made for the Indigenous Australia exhibition that said stolen land, stolen culture, stolen climate. So it's kind of trying to cover all of those different aspects. We wrote messages of solidarity all over it, and we've sent it to the Aboriginal communities in Australia who are going to be protesting at the exhibition when it transfers over there. So that was a really powerful kind of solidarity piece. And then we also we printed out 500 formal, official British Museum feedback forms, and we got museum goers to fill it in, whatever they wanted to say, but they were kind of saying, drop BP and give the stolen objects back. So yeah, all in all, that we kind of took over that space for 3 hours and we did all of those things. And it felt really, really powerful because we found a lot of people were engaging with us. A lot of people got the issues, were really supportive.
For more information on upcoming actions and to see past presentations, check out bpornotbp.org with dashes. It's right there.